You might be the wife waiting up at night. You might be the man struggling to provide, feeling like it's hopeless. Maybe you're the son who chose a broken road. Maybe you're the girl thinking you'll end up alone, praying, God, can you hear me? Oh God, are you listening? Am I more than flesh and bone? Am I really something beautiful? Yeah, I wanna believe that I'm not just someone dream soul that you don't see and you don't know. Yeah, I wanna believe. Jesus, help me believe that I am someone worth dying for. I know you've heard the truth that God has set you free, but you think you're the one that grace could never reach. So you just keep asking, oh, what everybody's asking. Am I more than flesh and bone? Am I really something beautiful?
Well, welcome to another Maverick Live Becoming Aligned. It's good to be with you today. A bit of a somber day as I'm allowing a few folks to join us real quick. Wanted to talk a little bit today. I wrote on identity on Sunday and actually have a full series on identity planned. But with the current events that seem to be becoming more prevalent as it relates to shootings, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about evil and weave that in with identity. If you're here with us live, please drop live in the chat and also tell us where you're logging in from. And likewise, if you're catching the replay, type replay. So this is the weekly broadcast for the Maverick movement, and the 0.1% effect is my flagship framework. And every Thursday I broadcast live here and to help others become the person that they were uniquely created to be, so that you can courageously live or follow the life and the work that you were created for. So here we talk about stop chasing surface fixes and start addressing the root problem, and that's identity and alignment. And today, as I shared, I was planning to talk about why identity matters. And I think I am going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to weave some other things that God has really put on my heart the last 2 or 3 days. I wrote a post about Irina Zarutska from Charlotte, North Carolina. And I thought it was just a heinous murder until I saw the video and multiple angles of the video on it. And I realized just how misaligned society has become. And I really wanted to tie in what misalignment does to us. I've spoken at length for about the last 2 years, and I'm getting more passionate about how misalignment causes us to have ache and distortion in our health, wealth, relationships, and our purpose. But now, as I'm looking at what's happening in society right now, the complete and total collapse of society as a result of misalignment that takes that ache and going into the next level, into darkness and eventually into evil. And that's what I'm seeing right now more and more in this day and age. And when I looked at the video of the Charlotte stabbing and the pan out of not only the person who perpetrated that heinous act, but also the 4 or 5 other people on that train and did nothing. I don't know that they could have stopped the act, but they didn't console this woman. They didn't try to stop bleeding. They just let her bleed to death on that train. And likewise, when I saw the video of Charlie Kirk yesterday, there was obviously no real opportunity to address the way that layout was, that shooting. But it shows how cold, cruel, and misaligned people are right now, that they're resorting to violence when people are disagreeing with others. So I'm going to try to bring this into the identity Substack that I wrote on Friday or Sunday that went out via my newsletter. And again, I have a seven post or 7 part series on identity that I really want to talk about. That's going to lead to how not knowing who we are and who we were created to be, how that contributes to all the pain that we have in our life. And now I'm extending it even further into darkness and an evil. I also wanted to reflect on one other thing. Today's 9/11. And I see this convergence of a lot of negative energy happening right now in September. And I wanted to speak just a moment of, I think 9/11 was one of my first real experiences, or first opportunities for me to really step back and think about what evil is. And at the time, I was not walking with Christ. I was Christian in name, as so many people are, born in a Christian family. I went to church. I was confirmed as a Methodist at the time. But it was 9/11 when I started to really open my eyes to the evil in the world, but I didn't really understand the source of it. And it's about not knowing who you were created to be and ultimately being aligned vertically, internally, and then horizontally with others in relationship. And I've shared about that many, many times. But 24 years ago today, I was rounding the tip of India. I was supporting the USS Carl Vinson Battle Group. I was in my ACINT specialist special duty program at the time. And I think I had been in the Navy about 12 or 13 years at that point. And we had just wrapped around the coast or the southern tip of India, started heading up into the northern Arabian Sea, and we got news of the first tower being hit. At that time, information was starting to get better into the fleet, where we were starting to get some digital satellite communication. So we were able to follow it in real time. And at that point, we immediately went to a full flank bell and started heading north. And I ended up spending 4.5 months in the northern Arabian Sea as the only ACINT specialist that was in theater, as 4 carrier battle groups took up station off of the coast of Pakistan as we were getting ready to conduct strikes into Afghanistan to go after Osama bin Laden. And that was, as I shared, my first real experience to understand how misalignment causes darkness and darkness causes evil. And just watching what has happened this week and then realizing today, this 24th anniversary of that today, I really sat with that a lot today during my Bible study and thinking about it and how I intend to shift my current brand to take identity, to take misalignment all the way out and to carry it all the way through from what basic misalignment looks like. And that's our ache, our problems and our health, our wealth, our relationships, our challenges with our purpose, and to carry it all the way through that. If people don't start addressing who they are and whose they are, that will go to darkness and eventually becomes evil. And I think about Romans chapter 1, verses 21 to really the end of the chapter 32. And it speaks, Paul, when he writes his letter to Rome, speaks so clearly on this very topic. And I'm going to read it because I want to make sure that those that are watching either live or on replay can feel the full power of this. For although they knew, us human beings knew God, we did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking and their foolish hearts were darkened. And this is a cause of misalignment, not being vertically aligned with God and not being internally aligned with who he created us to be. And that's the whole point of my 0.1% effect. You know, that very unique part of our DNA, that 0.1% that is different in every single human being on this planet. The 99% is the same with everybody else, but it's that 0.1% that sets us apart and creates us and gives us the gifts and the skills that God gives us to bring into the world. Claiming to be, back to the passage here, claiming to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in their lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. And I think this is what we're experiencing right now. And I go back to 9/11 and I see it has been consistently getting worse since then. And even more so since 2008 is when I think it's gotten exponentially worse as we've seen the shift in hate and evil. We see a man yesterday murdered for speaking. And you may not like his politics. You may not have agreed with him. But if somebody speaks and your response is to murder him, I don't know what else to say about this other than that is pure and total evil. That now a difference of opinion, a difference in our understanding of truth would cause such a thing other than what I just read in Romans 1, the end of Romans chapter 1. And I'm to the point that I'm watching a lot of people that really mean well in their hearts, and they're talking about we all need to just get along. We need to do better, and yes, we do, but we can't do it under our own power. If we don't submit to a moral lawgiver, a holy writer of the law to help us determine what's right and wrong, this is what happens because everybody thinks they're right. So I'll probably weave this in throughout more so going forward and taking that full thread again from misalignment to ache, how that ache distorts and causes our problems with our health, wealth, and relationships and our purpose, and how when we don't address those, it turns to darkness and eventually to evil. So I know that most, and Carrie Ann and Heather, thank you for dropping in where you're listening in live. I appreciate that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what, and my big brand is about calling out those people who fix the surface fixes. They treat the symptoms and not the underlying disease of misalignment. And I know if you're anything like me, you know that feeling that when we fix one area, another slips. When we start doing this type of work on ourselves, I've talked before about the spectrum analyzer in my 5F framework, turning the dials on that spectrum analyzer to find everything come into alignment. And our whole lives is always about turning the dials on that. And sometimes we turn the dial on our work and our work improves, but our home feels distant. Or we turn the dial up on our health and our health gets better and our stress spikes. Sometimes we start focusing on how to better communicate and our intimacy goes down. So it's always constant alignment. And this is why it's so important that we have to align vertically first, then internally with who we are before we can start to align with others in our relationships. And I'm curious, for those that are joining us live right now, what is an ache that you're carrying this week? And again, my ache right now is the evil that I'm seeing in the world. But what's one ache that you're carrying this week that you're struggling with? Many have heard my story that back on the 1st of January, 2017, that I went to sleep and I didn't wake up for 3 days. I put myself into a coma, 3-day coma, 3-day hospital stay. And that all came from years of striving, years of quiet misalignment that was building over time. And it caught up to me. And for all those years, I ignored the signals. And I had all the external success. You've heard me speak about this before. The wealth was building. I had prestige in the workplace, both in the Navy. I got my I love me wall here that maybe one of these days I'll show you the whole success that I had in the military, but I still didn't feel fulfilled. And as a result of that misalignment, eventually I collapsed. And I've also shared that collapse happened physically in 2017, but it happened in my marriage in 2018. And that was the final break for me. And had I not had a personal encounter with Jesus in February of 2018, I may have slipped further into darkness and further into evil like what we're seeing in the world today. So we all experience the same conditions: misalignment vertically, misalignment with who God uniquely created us to be. And some of us find a way out by the grace of God. Some of us have help. I had a very good, trusted peer and friend that I was able to call. And other people don't have that. And this is one of the callings that I'm going to encourage those that are listening today and watch the replay. And I did post this on my late post that I posted last night. As Christians, it is more apparent and more important than ever for us to speak the truth in love. We need to start calling out this evil. We need to start calling out alignment. And I want to stress that we're not calling out people. We're calling out the acts. We're calling out the words that are being used. But we can't label people as evil, even though there may be evil traits within them. Ultimately, all human beings are made in the image of God. It is the works of their own sin and the enemy and all of that sin and conditioning that's been dumped on every one of us our entire life. And it manifests itself into this complete and total evil. So thankfully, I had my personal encounter with Jesus in 2018. And that's what put me on this path. And that's why I've created this framework of what I worked through, what God helped reveal in me of who I was uniquely created to be, so I could celebrate the gifts that I actually hid, or the gifts that I used, but I used them to hurt other people. And, with every gift that we have a shadow behind that gift. And that is a result of being misaligned with God. So I just want to point out to everybody that if you feel like you're unraveling, it's not a weakness. You're out of alignment. And that is fixable. So I'm curious, again, as a follow-up question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how loud is that ache right now? Carrie Ann, I thank you for dropping in your comment. It's the evil and hatred that has your heart broken right now. But how bad is that ache right now? Last week, I was going through a lot of struggles as it related to my purpose because, I show up every day on social. I write. I've been doing this live Mondays and Thursdays there for a few weeks and been faithfully doing it now, I think upwards of about 2 months. We started actually a month and a half, and it gets a little tiring. But I also realized my ache because I didn't feel like I was fulfilling my purpose. And there is no greater fear that I have right now is to not fulfill the purpose that God put me on this planet to fulfill. And to not hear, well done, good and faithful servant, when I'm completed. But I also realized because of my own misalignment, I was getting out ahead of God. I wasn't fully discerning the spirit, and I was probably discerning evil spirits or even my own selfishness, my own wickedness, that I was doing some of what I was doing more for me and not for him. So he really showed that to me last week. And so much it caused me to kind of readjust a little bit these last few days. And now it's also what caused me to take a retreat this coming weekend. So I'm going into a full 3-day retreat, prayer retreat this weekend, where I will be in complete silence, just so I can get better attuned with him and get more aligned with him to make sure that I am following through in the things that he's asked me to do. So that's where I'm at right now. Carrie Ann, I appreciate you dropping in how you're feeling right now. But I also wanted to talk about, this is why identity matters so much. Psalm 139 talks about, you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. All the days ordained for me were written in your book. That's 139 verses 13 through 16. And I read this because, and this is the whole framework that I built, 0.1% effect is all built on Psalm 139, that our identity is given. It's not invented like so many out in the secular world talks about. We are born into a distorted world, and that distortion leaves marks. So we're born with distortion, and then we live through more and more distortion. And systems, families, cultures, and even churches can mirror us, but they cannot define us. Our parents loved us greatly most growing up. They wanted the best for us, but they often actually contributed to the distortion if they weren't really looking at who we were created to be. And I see it in the churches a lot as well. Well-meaning people in the church, pastors, often provide more input on what we should do based on their own perspective rather than who we are actually created to be. And Heather, I appreciate you dropping your comment about your work. And yes, working on clarifying your identity and quieting the lies of the enemy. Amen. And that is what we deal with on a daily basis, is those lies. Again, and this is why it's so important to learn how to discern the spirit, and why I'm taking 3 days off this weekend to go work on that. Saint Ignatius, I don't know those that are watching, he may be familiar with them, he was a Catholic priest. He was actually the founder of the Jesuits, but he created 14 steps on how to discern the spirits. And it's quite fascinating when you dig into that. So I'm really digging into that more. And I found that the more that I lean into this, the more it slows me down, so I can truly discern God's voice versus my own ego versus perhaps the evil one's voice. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that walk as I walk through that over the next several weeks. But it's been eye-opening for me so far. So I think that, Heather, that may provide you a little insight. I'm struggling with the same thing right there. I also wanted to share that, that a lot of distortions come because, 70% of the world, actually, I talked earlier that 99% of the world, we all share the same DNA. And because of so much of us is similar, we often assume that everything is similar. So the way a person likes to move through the world, or how he likes to communicate with another human being, or how he likes to be in fellowship in the church, or how he might want to deliver a message, or what ministries should be in the church or shouldn't, or who should be in what ministries, and what kind of job we should be doing. A lot of people provide that input based on what their perspective is, based on their own uniqueness, but they forget that sometimes that puts a projection on other people. And we're not in rigid molds, for we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We were made uniquely for a very specific purpose. Jeremiah 1:5 speaks about that, the purpose that he made for Jeremiah before he was even born, before the foundations of the earth were laid. So we have to be careful not to try to fit other people into a box, and we also don't fit in a box. One of the things that put me on this identity discussion today is I read an article from, I can't tell what his worldview was, but it was not a Christian worldview. And he talked about how identity, and a quote, fixed identity, has hurt people for many years. So his whole article was about having a fluid and undefined identity. So your identity changes as you grow and as you interact with other people, and as other people give you feedback. And it can change at will. And that is not biblical. Psalm 139, Ephesians 2:10, Jeremiah 1:5 all speaks about our identity, that God gave it in from the very beginning. But what was given to us is an identity, and I call it the diamond that is buried, and it's covered in dirt. And I wrote about that on Sunday, and I had an image that really what our job is to uncover the dirt from the diamond. And the diamond is perfection and the way God created us, or his intent for creating us. But then we were born into this distorted world, and from the very foundation, when we were born, and I'm going to write about this weekend, that we're born flawed. So I think that's Psalm 57 that talks about that. So it is up to us and working with Christ in order to work through those flaws, to get the dirt off the diamond going forward. So we don't live in rigid molds. We're not fluid and undefined, and we don't self-invent ourselves. We don't define ourselves so we can heal the ache. So identity, it's purely, if identity were just a role or fluid or self-manufactured, those deep longings, our origin, meaning, morality, and purpose, or our destiny, they have no steady reference. And the ache will always remain. So I'm curious to the audience, what distortion has pressed you most? And this is influences throughout your lives. Is it the rigid distortion or the rigid way of being that your family or coworkers put you in a box? Or was it the opposite, that you can be whatever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do, or you can self-invent whatever you want to be? And again, I want to make sure that I don't mischaracterize this. It is important for us to inspire and encourage other people to go after their dreams. But I also want to stress that our dreams should be in line with biblical teaching and who he created us to be. And this is where we start going into the distortion that I read in Romans chapter 1. If we start chasing the created and not the creator, that identity is going to be distorted. That is when we're self-defining our identity. So yes, chase the dreams, but based on who that we were uniquely created to be. So identity doesn't need to be invented. It needs to be uncovered. And I've talked about this already. It's the diamond in the dirt, or the diamond covered in dirt. In my older days, I used to call it something else. But this is where our 0.1% effect lives. And I'll reiterate that 8 billion people on this planet share 99.9% the same DNA. But it's that remaining 0.1% that is where your distinct design is. And I've referenced it before. That is the fingerprint of God on you. And I recently started writing, that is your GodPrint. Just like our fingerprints are very unique, our GodPrint is unique. And ironically, that's where all of the conditioning and all of the trauma that we've experienced in our life lies as well. Because that conditioning, when done in a righteous, in a well-meaning way, people don't intentionally try to hurt us, but they hurt us because they are trying to put us in that box. And I just want to state that, conditioned people condition people. Distorted systems multiply distortion. It's like the echo chamber. And our shift right here is to stop repainting the dirt or putting nail polish over that dirt. And it's really becoming aligned with God and letting him help us remove it. Let him remove it. We need to stop outsourcing our identity. We need to return to our design as the person that he uniquely created us to be. So I asked this question. Actually, let me just share that alignment vertically with God will settle our core. And when we are fully aligned with him and we know whose we are, we don't have to hustle for our worth. We don't have to do to be worthy. We just be. And when we become internally aligned and understand who we are, this is, again, where the core of the 0.1% effect is, where I help those reveal their traits, their gifts, recognize the shadows or the challenges with the gifts so we can move those shadows out in front and keep them out in front. That's the distortion, the sin that we are born with. But we learn to make decisions from clarity based on who we are and who we're not, and not make decisions on fear. And then thirdly, when we get aligned with God and aligned internally with us, we can get aligned horizontally with everybody else. And now our presence with others deepens, our intimacy deepens, and our impact on the world changes, and it becomes lasting. So I'd like to challenge those that are listening, and whether you're listening live or you watch the replay, before you go to bed tonight, I'd encourage you to read Psalm 139. Read the whole Psalm if you can, but put some emphasis on Psalm 139, 1 through 6, verses 1 through 6, and 13 through 16. And when you read those 10 verses, read it out loud. And when it comes to words like I am fearfully and wonderfully made, insert your name in it. And then in the morning, ask yourself, where am I about to perform? Where am I invited to align? And journal it. And live the answers to those questions. Live it out for one day. And if you're in, those that are watching live, and again, the replay, because I always follow up on comments, the replay. If you're going to do this, drop an I'm in. Let me know that you're going to experiment with this and see how it might change your life. And these are the types of transformations that will help as part of the 0.1% effect work that I do. This is where transformation begins. It's not more information. It's with a remembrance of who you are and whose you are, and remembering who you were created to be and become fully aligned with that. So I will I'll begin to close really quick. And Carrie Ann, I know that you've already worked with me already and you're familiar with the 0.1% effect and the report itself. But for any that are listening now or watch the replay, if you're interested in getting a snapshot of who you are, please join the snapshot queue, because what I really want to do is expand this live to have guests on the live so we can talk about specifically your 0.1% effect. So you can join a free snapshot queue, and I'll throw up a website very quickly for you to sign up for that. You can join the free snapshot queue where I can feature you live. And you can sign up for that at snapshot.maverickunleashed.com. And Carrie Ann, you don't need to do this because you've already gotten yours, but I would love to have you online or on the live if you're willing to join me. And if you're interested in learning a little bit about who you are, we can do this privately too. And you can get a personal snapshot, and you can get that at snapshot.maverickunleashed.com. And if this intrigues you and you'd prefer to go all in and get a much, much deeper report, at that same website, you can get a deeper discovery report. I can write as many as 70 to 85 pages for the people that I've written it for. Has been somewhere in that general area that's very specific to your design, and it highlights your gifts, the challenges with those gifts, how you move through the world, and ultimately how God uniquely created you to be. And the last thing that I'm doing, and you'll also see it at the Snapshot website, is right now when I write these reports, it's very, very manual. It takes me about 7 to 10 days per report, so I can only do so many per month. So there's a bit of a list slowly, but what I want to do is convert that into an automation, that I can convert my process, the process that God has given me in this 0.1% effect discovery process, and I want to automate as much of it as possible. So I'm building what's called a clarity engine right now, and I am looking for founders to be part of my Maverick Awakening founder circle, part of my inner circle, to help fund this clarity engine. So there's information about that at that website as well. And I want to remind those that are still listening too, is the 0.1% is not your flaw. You know, we all look so differently, and it's interesting. That's where most of the hate comes in. We think differently, we act differently. That's all part of that 0.1% effect, because 99.9% of our DNA is the same. So we are constantly being attacked for the 0.1% differences, rather than celebrating that 0.1% difference in every single other human being. So I want to stress again, it's not your flaw. It's your fingerprint. It's your GodPrint. And when you align with it, the ache stops. And that ache stops, we can start aligning ourselves. We fully understand our identity, our impact, our intimacy. But when we stay misaligned, we start to slip. We start to slide into darkness, because that ache never gets addressed. And I'm sure if you think about when you have recurring pain and it stays and stays and stays, how it just drains on you. And that's ultimately what leads to the darkness and the evil that we're seeing in the world right now. So those are the paths. We get aligned and we begin to heal. We get aligned vertically, internally, and horizontally with others, or we start to slip into darkness and evil. And that's what Paul writes about in Romans 1. Misalignment or alignment is a life or death decision. Are we going to live as the person that God uniquely created us to be? Are we going to courageously live and work as the person he uniquely created to be? Or are we going to slip into darkness and death and cause hate and destruction and murder, and eventually have to answer to God when he takes us off this planet? So I want to thank everybody for showing up today. And a reminder that we go live every Thursday at 1. And I'm going to encourage those that are listening, actually subscribe either on YouTube, which I am live streaming right now on YouTube, LinkedIn, and on Facebook. So please subscribe so you'll get all the notices when I go live. I also take these lives and I take what I think are the best parts of them and I cut them up off into shorts, and I post the shorts up on social media as well. So if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, you'll see the shorts and you'll get alerted to when I post those. I also remind you that Psalm 139, that David writes, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You knit me together. I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And I encourage those that are watching, please let that be your mirror this week. Your identity matters because your design matters, and you were designed on purpose. And that's all I have today. And I will see you all next week.